Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I will be featuring all these PC components to be built, in this case known as the LianLi Lancool 216. Before I begin, I'd like to thank all the various brands who have provided me with all the IT equipments. First off, with this chassis coming from LianLi, thank you very much to provide this 216 case for me. Next will be Arctic, who have provided me with the P12 ARGB fans in white, just a bit of twist, though this case is black. Next will be Team Group, who have actually provided me with this DDR5 RAMs, and also to Montec, who have provided this DT24 air cooler, which is just for an illustration because this build is mainly on using AIO. But for my viewer, I'll show you how this air cooler fit into the case with the rest of the component. Last but not least, coming from Tech Dynamic, thank you to provide this X670E Steel Legend motherboard. Let's begin. Top left are all the PC components that will be in this build, and on my lower left, these are the sequence I practice. Most of my friends and colleagues, even some of my viewers, they will make use of this sequence and they find it useful. I'll explain to you why. Now, you can skip this part if you find it lengthy. There are timestamps. Be it whether you're a new PC builder or an advanced PC builder, I know you're excited to purchase and to gather all your parts, but do not practice this as a night. Once you have your parts, fit everything into a case, inclusive of AIO if you choose to have this as a cooling solution for your processor. As mentioned, do not place all these components in whereby you have fitted your motherboard, your processor, your AIO that's on the processor, you have mounted all your fans, did your neat cable management tidily, inclusive of your PSU. What if when you turn on the system and you wanted to hit to UEFI? That is the first thing that you will need to do, and it doesn't boot up. It could be the cause of one of this component that it comes DOA, which is date on arrival, especially for motherboard. So by that time, right, when you realize it, you have all this plugged into the case and all the cable management done properly. End up you have to remove off and to troubleshoot, take out the motherboard and to troubleshoot. That will be a hassle. And if you're thinking that do the troubleshooting on the spot itself, right, it's going to be a hassle too, because of the space of your case, depending on how big your case is. Another thing to take note is that imagine that all is inclusive of your AIO on the processor, and when you turn on the system, what if there are leakage on the host itself? Then it might drip to your components and to damage your components. That would be even worse. For my practice, what I'll do is, before placing any components in the PC, in the case itself, first thing I'll do, I'll test the AIO first. If I intend to have one in my system, I'll run the AIO with a PSU itself. Make sure that the pump is running. Make sure there are no leakage. I will run it probably about 3 to 5 minutes and to observe the hose and to feel the pump. Make sure everything is running properly. Then I'll test the fan, whether it's spinning. Next will be the ARGB. All this tested must be done outside the case first. Once that's done, I'll tackle the internal component, starting off with the motherboard. If your motherboard have a BIOS flashback button at the back, please read your menu in order to flash the latest BIOS. I will do the BIOS flashback first. This is the first thing to do. So once you know that it's up to date, next thing I'll do is I'll plug in the processor, I'll plug in the RAMs, inclusive of placing your cooler, make sure it's running, plugging the radiator fans to your motherboard, and jumpstart the motherboard and bring it to UEFI. Oh, forgot to mention, if your processor has a built-in graphic output, which has a APU, for Intel is IGP, you can make use of the motherboard display out, be it whether DP or HDMI. I would prefer to use the HDMI port, it's easiest. So once it boot to UEFI itself, check all the specification under system info. Make sure you have the correct processor and make sure it reads the RAM. Sometimes it only reads one stick, so you need to turn it off and do the adjustment. So once this is done, right, you know that everything is done and boot up nicely. Next thing, I will populate only one M.2. Then I'll boot to UEFI, and it does read. Okay, then I'll off the system again. If you have a discrete graphic card, plug in to this slot over here. And to display out, do not make use of the motherboard built-in display port, make use of the graphic card. So this is to test if your graphic card is working properly. Once this is all working properly, right, next I will install, since there's one M.2 populated over here, I will install the Windows OS, be it whether Windows 10 or Windows 11. Once that's booted up and I know that it's functioning properly, then I will start to populate all this M.2. Once I've tested everything okay outside the case, I will be placing all these components inside the case. To place all this in the case, you have to prepare the case. First off, remove off the side panel on both sides, the tinted glass and the other side, the front bezel, the top, and things that you do not need. As this system, I will be only using all this hard disk, I should say, or M.2 SSDs. That's the reason why I remove all this hard disk cage that can hold 3.5 inch or 2.5 inch SSD, which I do not need. This is located at the bottom of the case itself, whereby it's right in front of the PSU. So by removing that cage, there are more room for me to do cable management for the PSU cable. And next, more airflow will be going through to cool down the PSU, or even to this section over here, because there are slots over here. So this is the reason why I took out the cage. And if you have trays just like this Lancool 216, it has a top tray you can remove. Take this out so that I can mount the AIO from here, do all the cable management properly before I plug to the case itself. Now, I'll be cutting short on how to install all the components over here. There is a step-by-step guide, or should I say a playlist with part 1 to part 3. If you guys want to know into details, those are very lengthy videos, but it's educational. You can click on my top right hand corner, whereby I leave the playlist URL over there. This is the part where I like most. Some will hate it. Now, for vanity, look at the original fans of the P12 itself. I like to do highlighting. So what I did is, I changed the tab. And for me to change the tab, if you want to, right, when you pull off these tabs here, make sure you do from the top and not from the bottom. As from the top, when you pull off, right, see, it's in one piece. You will not have some residue on it. If you pull from the bottom, which is the wider part, you will definitely leave some residue. So having to say this, right, this will give contrast to your fan itself. See? I'm not going to do the 4 sides over here, just to illustrate. And to place it back, place at the wider part at the bottom, then push it down. See, it did give the fan some kind of contrast and look, and it does match my motherboard. In fact, it's this theme. Now, next thing will be, as you notice that most of this Arctic fan, right, I know that I should not be teaching you guys this, but I enjoy doing this based on the fact that this thing here is so long. So when you daisy chain all the fans, right, it's gonna be like super long, and you have to, you know, do the cable mess. So instead, what I will do is I will cut off to the appropriate length that I wanted, and to do my self crimping, which this have already done cutting off from this cable. What you need to retain is this 4 PWM plug and this daisy chain plug. And how do you actually do this? What I do is I have removed all the pins from this fan header. So this is how I do it. See, it's out. And this fan header itself, right, if you take a closer look, right, now there are indication over here with 1, and then with this and this, all the markings. I'm not too sure if you can see. So this oh, maybe I should show you on this, it will be clearer. See the markings? It does show you pin 1 followed by the next pin. Pin 1 is always the ground. Okay, pin 1 is the ground, followed by the positive, the sensor, and the RPM. So knowing this, please do this if you know what you're doing. That's what I'm trying to say. So what I will be doing is, as mentioned, retaining this because you need to plug it back. and to have this daisy chain. So what I'll do is I'll cut off this end. Okay. Then of course, with this end over here, right, it's going to be connected over here. So you need to strip the wires with the wire stripper. Now you might be saying that all that you see, how come there are 3 in each fan itself, where else there are 4 over here? Meaning you say the actual one that's connected is 4 and 1 is 3. Reason being, right, at the third, okay, this is negative, this is positive, this is the sensor of how much the RPM is running and the temperature itself, and this is meant for controlling the RPM. So on the third sensor, right, you only need one fan to give instruction, as in like to the motherboard, saying that hey, I'm running off this temperature and at this RPM. So censoring one, right, not confusing. Imagine that all these are daisy chain and each fan giving off the signal to the motherboard. The motherboard will get confused. So that's the reason why you have 3 over here, whereby you connect to the rest of the fans, right, you will be connected to 3 instead of 4, because this sensor you only need to pick up 1 for your motherboard, and this, the last one, is to control the RPM. Once it sends the temperature itself and such, right, it will give off the motherboard to ramp up your RPMs, and the RPM speed itself, right, will go through this cable and to the rest of your daisy chain fans. Now with this say, right, I will just crimp as in like to do the wire strips, and I'm not going to go in depth of how I do it, just a brief introduction. If you want to, there is another video which I'm going to place the URL at my top right hand corner that will show you close up and how I do the crimping itself, and why I'm doing this I will explain later. So once you strip all the wires, make sure you twist it. Do it on this end and also at the other end, which I've already done the stripping. Now knowing the readings, right, an indication for me is this strip here is pretty prominent. As you can see, this tells me this is the ground, followed by the positive. So with this said, over here, which is ground and positive, and the third wire is missing, followed by the RPM. So with this said, right, I will do this. Then to crimp it. Now this is going to be a fast forward process, and to crimp it, right, you can purchase this off, which I've taken off the set. I will leave the URL in my description if you intend to do your crimping, do a trial and error. If you want to try, right, please make sure to try on your case fan and not on your actual fan, and make sure to use a 9V batteries to test it. For illustration purposes, this is a 9V. As you can see over here is positive, this is negative. So knowing this is positive, right, and this is negative, on the fan itself, right, take a look at the fan. Now I know that this strip, as I mentioned to you, this is negative, which I will touch here, and this is the second pin out, or should I say the second cable is the positive. See, it starts spinning. So I will just do the crimping, align to this, meaning to say this with the dash itself, and with the dash over here, this one. So I will align it, then to crimp. Now over this session here, all will be fast forwarded after I've done the first one. And when you have done this, right, align this properly here and twist the wires, align it, then using my engineering crimper, I got to flatten this a bit so that it can house on the pin. Okay, what do I mean by this? Again, as you can see, right, the pin over here, there is two wings, the top section and the bottom section. So I need to slot this in nicely. Okay, it's pretty hard to see right now. So once I've done this, right, I'll hold on it using the crimper itself and to crimp the fan. I mean the wires. Do some minor adjustment. Then to push the outer wing, or should I say the lower wing, into the cable, then I crimp again. Now I make use of this engineering tool itself manually, because some of them will just crimp both at one time. This gives me a better control. So as you can see, this is the final work. So I'll do the rest. Alright, this is done. Now to test whether this crimping is good or not, do not plug the header first. So use another fan where you have actually done the crimping job. Plug this over. See? And looking at the readings as mentioned to you, so this is the ground and this is the positive. So again, take a look at the two fans. If you've done the crimping properly, right, both will run. So this is positive and this is negative. Okay. See? Both will run. So this will tell you that you have done the crimping properly. And then to slot it in. And make sure you know which orientation. As I mentioned to you, there is a 1 on the connector itself. Make sure you plug it this ground to the number 1, and from there you slot the rest, and it will be done. Follow in sequence. Now on the third pin itself, sometimes it can't go in, so what you need to do is to place it downwards, touching only the metal connection, push it in. See, it's done. Then followed by the last one. See, this is done. So right now you have shorter wavelength, easier to cable management. Imagine that you are doing this. Okay. Now for the ARGB, I will not touch, because this you need to route to your ARGB point. So to lessen all the cable mess itself, right, look at this. It's pretty simple, straightforward. See, it just plug, so that you don't even have to feeder with cable ties on this. It's just nice. And when you tuck in, this is the front fans. When you tuck into the case itself, right, it's all neatly done. So it goes with the third one. But of course, once you have done this, right, there's one more thing that you will need to do, because, okay, let me just show you. Imagine that you have plugged all in. Okay, these are all the fans that you've plugged in. Okay, assuming that you plug in, these are the front fan and it's facing inside. See, but this is too short to reach your, oh, should I say over here? It's too short for you to, oh, I've plugged it. Okay, anyway, just imagine that this is too short. So what you will do, making use of the rest which I've cut over here, you can plug another pin. Okay, this connector over here. And over at this end, you can crimp. And I will show you. This is what I've actually done to extend the connection. So this is the only longest part where you need to feeder. And of course, this plug here is different plug. You can purchase it. See, these are the pins different. Again, I will do the crimping like this one. Once you have done, right, you just clip it in and to use it. Now, a better illustration, I'm not going to use this, but my AIO. Best part about this is, if you were to see my AIO itself, right, take a look at these cables. Okay, ignore the ARGB. Now take a look at all these cables. It's tucked nicely. It's not thick. All are shortened. As this cable over here, right, is meant for the one that I've done over here, which I've shown you. This is the only long piece. The rest are all very short. And best of all, you can tuck in within the screws itself. As in, okay, what I'm trying to say is, if you have it short, okay, this cable's over here, you can just tuck it in, having your radiator screw, right, going through, and to hold your cables, which is neat and tidy. And the only thing that you need to feather, right, as I know that this is going to go to my motherboard itself, so it's going to be, you know, this way. This will be the front, and all this will be hidden behind. And this short cable, right, when you plug to the motherboard, you can just tuck this up, so it will be pretty neat. And the only thing that you left with are all this ARGB, whereby you find the hole to pull through, and you can just do a cable tie over here. So you're only leaving with this. That's all. It's a good trick which I often use. This will tidy up most of my cable mess. If you do not want to, right, you will have to go through the traditional, as in, like, you know, do the cable management first. But often do your cable management first before you plug to your motherboard itself. As you can see here, I placed all the PC components that I needed in this case itself, mainly the liquid AIO with the fans on the radiator, the rear fans, the bottom fans, and the front fans. The front, I'll be using the original 260mm ARGB fans from this case, and I placed my graphic card, my motherboard, my RAMs, and of course the processor itself. You might be curious, hey Kyo, you're using an AIO, why are you placing this air cooler over here? Well, to answer one of the questions that come from my viewers, they've asked me this question: can I place a tall air cooler that is around the height of 170mm tall in order for me to place it in and to close the side panel, I mean the tinted glass panel? Now, assuming this is the tinted glass panel, for this Montech DT24 ARGB cooler, the height is 158mm tall. So let me just measure the clearance between the tip to here. Now you have exactly 20mm clearance. So that plus, let's say 10mm, right, is 160. So probably I would say it's 170. If you have the air cooler that has a height of 170, right, you're safe to put it in this case, not a problem. Now the only thing that you need to take note, right, is your rear IO, the shroud itself, I mean the heatsink for your back VRM, sometimes it's pretty tall. So if it's tall, right, take note that if you have a dual fan air cooler itself, I don't think you can mount it at the back if it's too tall, because imagine this is 170 and you were to lift this up, right, probably I would say you can close it if the height is 175, but if it reaches after 179 or, you know, I mean 178 or 179, right, then it's a no-go. You might not be able to close your case, so take note on this. Another thing is that to show you guys, okay, having the air cooler, right, the width is normally about 124 to 130, so there are plenty of clearance, as you can see. And you'll be wondering, can I mount a 4090? Yes, you can. The mounting is the same of this plate. This is a 4090, see, it's of the same slot, I mean the you know, the alignment as my 3080, not a problem. You can slot it in. And you've been wondering, yeah, since I have the clearance over here, right, what about the height? Well, as mentioned to you, right, this is 158, okay, and this Gigabyte OC over here is 150, and street is 149.5. So definitely you can fit it in, no problem. And what about the length? Well, assuming that you're placing vertical mount, do take note, if you want to put vertical mount on your GPU, you will need to sacrifice your two fans over here, because the mounting of the PCIe slot, right, is below here. So you have to lower down. It's like, you know, you take these two off and you will lower down your card. Now, with this position over here, right, take a look. This is my Gigabyte 4090. I can slot it exactly in. So, no problem for you to mount a vertical 4090 card into this case itself, because do remember that you need to take this two off and this will lower down. And if you worry about the length itself, right, especially for those of you who wanted to mount an AIO in front, now as mentioned, right, there are plenty of ways to play this. Imagine that, okay, this card itself, the length is 340. If you're having a straight, will be 360. Even at 360, okay, let me just show you, hang on. Okay, assuming from here to here, this is the length of the card. Okay, 340. 360 is to here. Let me just give a bit of, margin of error. So assuming that this is 360 over here. Now, you still have clearance to put your radiator over here and the other side your fans. So for a strict card, not an issue. Now, next thing is about the AIO itself. As I mentioned about the GPU clearance and such, so not a problem. You shouldn't have a worry whether to mount it horizontally or vertically. This case had plenty to offer. Now for the AIO itself, right, this is just a normal 360 Be Quiet silent loop 2. It has a thickness, the radial thickness of 28mm plus the 25mm fans, right? The tall, or should I say the height of this is 53mm. Assuming that you're placing Arctic liquid freezer 360, it's a height of 63. Then you might say that, oh, I'm going to hit my rear fan. Now, please take note that when you're placing AIO, right, you do not have this at all, okay? So there are a lot of space over here. You might be thinking that I will hit this rear fan. No problem. See? So there are plenty of clearance for you to place an Arctic liquid 360 with the thickness of 63mm. And for Arctic, please take note, do not place any 280 and above, because you will hit your side VRM and even your RAM height. The build is done. The theme might not be your liking, but it's definitely mine. I like colors like black, white, grey and silver. Speaking of which, I deliberately make use of black screws to contrast the white fans over here, as you can see. And I've changed out the tabs using the black fans, which I've shown you earlier. I like things with contrast. It's just like my graphic card that I've done earlier, last time. See, I like things to be pop up more than ARGBs. The only thing that I do not like is this graphic card over here, whereby it's plain black. Probably I will do something about it, spray white and do some black or silver linings. Now, the experience of building all these PC components in this case itself is fantastic. Though it's a small tower case, but it's so modular. I'll share with you two incidents. First incident was, I was fiddling with my ARGB controller with all the connection on the fans itself, and I noticed that my EPS cable was not connected. So I was like, oh no, I have to remove off my graphic card, remove off the AIO itself, then to feeder with the EPS. Good thing about this case, it's modular as mentioned. I'm able to remove the top tray and to feed my EPS cable. Second incident was, as I was trying to connect the connectors on the bottom fans itself to the ARGB controller, I wasn't able to reach somehow. So since it's modular, this bottom mesh panel here, you're able to remove it using this screw over here. Remove this screw and you can remove the whole panel. So it let me able to connect my connectors of these two fans right to the ARGB controller. Flipping to the back itself, as you can see, it's very clean. You might be wondering how come it's so empty. Reason being, I did a lot of crimping, as in like alter the length of the fans, the ARGB cables and such. Now, for those of you who actually saw my illustration earlier on, if you do not know what to do, please don't do it. Or if you want to do it at your own risk. I do have tutorials on this crimping on the PWM fans and the ARGB itself. If you like to know more, right, you can click on my top right hand corner where it shows you all the tutorials. Take note on this. Now, One last thing is that I did mention about the vertical mount on the GPU itself. If you to mount it this way, right, you got to sacrifice 2 fans. By default, this case itself, yes, you have to sacrifice. So what I did is, I did mount exactly according to the fan, to the case itself. I wanted to mount the, taking advantage of the bracket to mount a fan over here to blow cool air to cool my GPU. But the thing is, if you to look at the HDMI, DP and those socket, which is much lower, which is exactly this height, I can't reach at all. I can't plug those plugs. So I can't use this bracket at all. Unless you do it horizontally, then this over here, right, will be at the top. I mean the HDMI, DP and such, right, it will be on the top row itself, where else this is at the lower section. So this allows you to plug in if you do it vertically, horizontally. So I was thinking I still would not want to give up this thinking of doing vertical mount, because reason being, when you do vertical mount, right, hot air will be coming off from the side over here and from the bottom. So if I do it horizontally itself, right, all the hot air will be pushing to my motherboard, which I do not want it. Instead, I make use of the Lancool 2 vertical bracket, which you can see over here. It fits good, and I can place 2 bottom fans which pushes the hot air up. So this is something which is good. Now the final test, just to show you, see, everything loads up fine, not a problem. Oh, by the way, I'm using this remote to remote start. I always like to use remote start. And of course, I can change color if I want to. See, even in sequence, this is what I like. Alright, I hope you guys have actually enjoyed what I've shared with you, and thanks to all the brands who have aided on providing me with all the necessary, like from Arctic, all this P12 fans, and from LianLi, who provided me this case for OpenView for my viewers. Also to Tech Dynamic, who have provided the motherboard, and to Montech, which I illustrated on the air cooler itself on this case, which is the DT24 ARGB. For those of you actually new to my channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, take care, goodbye, see ya.